just a little bit of my background, and then I'm going to introduce my my colleagues on the panel. My background was consumer marketing for blue chip companies, basically, both in the UK and all around the world. And after an executive career, trying to help businesses grow and making mainly mistakes and getting everything wrong, I set up a strategic consultancy a few years ago called Think Again Growth. We now operate all over the world, and we help businesses to do that, to position themselves to grow sustainably and profitably. And the particular USP we have, which I'll just mention because it's relevant to the discussion, is that we use a set of implicit research tools that enable us to understand emotional motivations very, very clearly. And so that's why I was particularly interested in chairing this session. I have a very, very august panel. I'm going to introduce them now. I'm going to start with Mayor Mumtaz, who heads up the global brand operation for Western Union, a huge financial services company. And Mayor's particular responsibilities are consumer money transfer, which is hugely important, and we'll come back to that in the course of this discussion. And also she has responsibility for brand strategy and visual identity. So totally relevant to what we're talking about. So Mayor, welcome. Thank you for being on the panel.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Amit Sharma is the Global Marketing Strategy Head and the lead for Americas and Europe marketing for Tata Communications. So you must have the biggest business cards in the world, Amit, to get all those titles on. Tata Communications is the telecoms arm of the Tata Group, and as I'm sure you all know, Tata Group is huge. 115 billion business with over 100 businesses around the world, and wonderful, brand names: Jaguar, Land Rover, Tetley, and many others. So it's a huge business. And Amit, thank you for being on the panel, and welcome to today's discussion. Our third member is Samantha Fay, Sam Fay. Sam is Senior Vice President Global Brand Strategy at Guinness World Records, which anybody here who grew up as I did in the UK, Guinness World Records was an enormously powerful part of our growing up. It was one of the ways that I sort of discovered the world and how incredible the world could be, and sort of stimulated so many discussions with friends and family, and again, the sort of emotional connections that those discussions will be very, very relevant to today's discussion. So Sam, thank you for being on the panel, and welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And the fourth member of our panel is Simon Ryder. Simon is our sales guru. So we have three sort of marketing gurus and one sales guru. Simon is our sales guru, and Simon is Global Sales Enablement Director at JLL, which I used to know as Jones Lang LaSalle, I think. And they are one of the world's biggest property and property management companies. When I was in Hong Kong, we dealt with them a lot with our portfolio of retail businesses, but I hadn't realized quite how big they were until Simon was describing to me how much of the Canary Wharf estate is managed by JLL and what proportion of the properties of companies like HSBC they manage. They really are huge. So Simon, thank you very much for being on the panel today. So that's our panel, and just a little bit of introduction, and then we'll get into the discussion. I mean, we're going to talk a lot about the importance of emotional connection in our businesses and how we optimize that. But we must sort of have this conversation in the context of where we all are now, the coronavirus pandemic, and what that's doing to our customers. And there's an awful lot of academic work telling us that when these huge societal upheavals happen, like this pandemic or the financial crisis or right back to the world wars, it has fundamental changes in the way that people feel about themselves and their lives and their families, but also the businesses that they work with. And the shifts that happen during those times, they're emotional shifts, they're very profound shifts, and they're lasting. Just to give one obvious example that we'll all remember, you'll probably all remember how after the financial crisis of 2008, the way that people felt about the big banks changed forever. You know, that bond of trust that had sustained them, even though in many ways they were very bad businesses to do business, didn't open the weekends, and you know, very hard to do business with them sometimes. Nevertheless, that bond of trust sustained them. And that was broken by the financial crisis and opened the door for small challengers like Metro and Starling and First Direct. And so it's just an example of the way that as emotions shift in this way during these times, they have profound effects. And as sales and marketing professionals, we need to try to understand what those shifts are now and try to help our businesses to adapt to them. So just to take that to the panel, I just wanted to open up with a few comments on their views of the importance of emotional needs in their markets and how important those emotional connections are in the businesses that they work in. Sam, you had some really interesting and powerful insights about the sort of emotional connection between people and books in the context of Guinness World Records. Could you talk a little bit about that?
For sure. I mean, in terms of our revolution, the digital publishing revolution, which you'll remember as the launch of ebook, iPad back in 2010, absolutely your publishing company, and we really had to be rectified. Invested loads of time and effort in devising apps and extra content for ebook. But you know what? At the end of the day, parents want their kids to read books. I certainly want my kids to read books, and that emotional and physical drive to pick up a book never really went away. It just changed. But as a business, it did make us look outside publishing. It made us look at what else we could do in terms of record breaking and brands and businesses. And I'm fairly confident that this particular change as well will see us shifting our business more and more online. We all will be.
Yeah, and that sort of special connection, emotional connection between people and books, so far is different, isn't it? Than a digital experience is different from a physical book experience. And it's very interesting how that's continued to be a very important part of the, you know, what makes your business work, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that real emotional connection that you have with the things that you love, which I think applies to everything.
Yeah. So that, you know, that's probably relatively easy for us to understand in the context of Guinness World Records, because that's an essentially sort of, it's fun, it's an emotional business, it's great. But again, in preparation for this call, I was talking with Maya, and she works in an area which you would think is somewhat devoid of emotion. You know, fund transfer, that's just moving money digitally. Well, who could get excited about that? And yet, she was telling us really interesting anecdotes about the emotional importance to her customers of the service that Western Union provides. So, May, can you just tell us about that a little bit? I thought it was extremely relevant.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I joined the company, I think it's actually got a really, really rich territory for things like brand building, because it's money transfer is kind of different from banking in that sense. You're not just supporting yourself. There's an element of a global audience, people, you know, sort of money movers or dual belongers, as we sometimes like to think of them, people who've moved to other countries and are making lives for themselves and sending money back to their friends and family, you know, migrant communities, expats, or just people who are who've moved, you know, who have needs or belong to more than one country. And so the biggest chunk of our business is about is serving people who need to send money to another part of the world, whether it's to pay bills, whether it's to, you know, gifting for birthdays, etc., or just to make their families feel like, you know, they're still there even though they're not there. And so it is a very, very emotional brand from that perspective. Of course, we tend to do a lot of communication, which is just talking about our products and services. But I think this time especially made us realize how important it is for people to be able to just you know, use our service to do that one thing for their families, to make them feel like they're there, especially when they really can't be there. You know, people are sort of stuck in places, they can't travel back. Some people have lost their jobs, some people have lost their incomes. You know, so being able to sort of provide that continuity somehow is what creates the very emotional part of our brand and our service.
The other thing that I thought was very interesting about what you were saying was that in the current environment where people can't go into branches very, very easily,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because I know a lot of that fund transfer in some markets was done physically by people going into branches. Well, they can't do that anymore. And you were talking about the importance of your company facilitating, making it easy to do digital transfers. Yeah. And
Yeah. I mean, like every company, we obviously have digital services, but money, and you know, you were talking about the financial crisis, but how we handle money or deal with money is a very habitual thing. People tend to be very sticky in their habits, and so there's a, you know, majority of us sort of what we call receive markets. So where people are sending money to, although they're banked, they're not digitally banked, and people still have this sort of association of going to pick up cash from Western Union. So cash pickup is a massive part of one of the methods of how people get their money. And in some communities, like in Dubai or like UAE is a big market, you know, people get paid in cash. And so they need to sort of fund in cash, and they don't necessarily want to sort of go put it in a bank account and do a bank transfer. So there's a lot of physical cash that flows through our rails for money transfer, and so, you know, remittances, things like that. And so, yeah, we had to organize very quickly to see where we can keep locations open, to communicate up-to-date information to our consumers so that you're not going through that whole process of, oh my God, I need money, or my money is stuck, or I don't know how to get it from the other end because the company's just shut off. So, you know, communicating with people at this time was extremely important, to make them aware of how they can send money, whether their money is going to be picked up at the other end in our usual methods, or provide alternate methods. And so, yes, of course, digital growth, like every retail company, is a big target for us, and so we have seen, you know, our digital business boost, and we have revised or re-strategized our tactics to further grow our digital business at this time, with keeping the customer at the heart, right? To be able to give them options.
Yeah, and I mean that the way that your company has adapted to so different environments, you know, harder to go into branches. Okay, so we understand the emotional importance of this to our customers, so we will make it easier for them to transfer funds digitally. And what we find as we work with lots of companies in this environment is consumers see when companies are doing something extra for them. You know, if they're responding to an issue that's come up during this coronavirus period, the company gets big emotional rewards for doing that.
Yeah, if there's one emotion I can name that's been really key in our re-strategizing, it's reassurance.
Yeah,
you know, so
yeah,
which
definitely
goes hand in hand with money. Yeah.
Yeah, just we had another example recently of a bank that we were working with where the as coronavirus happened, suddenly being able to solve problems online became very important for their customers, because they could no longer go into branches to solve problems, which is what you normally do. And so suddenly there was this huge worry about, if something goes wrong, what do? I can't go into a branch anymore. This bank has provided an enhanced way for me to solve problems. Thank you. That's great. You've recognized my need. You know, that's how you build those powerful emotional bonds. And it felt to me like that's what your company's been doing, you know, exactly really during that period. And the other sort of aspect of, you know, emotional importance, we're talking about sort of businesses, brands, and consumers. But the other point, and Amit made this very powerfully, is that it's not just about consumer emotions. You know, if you're managing any sort of organization, it's about the emotions of the people who are inside your organization as well, and understanding the turmoil and the emotions that they're going through. And you know, Amit, you're working for a huge business. You know, there's huge numbers of people there. They're all going through this crisis in different ways. Can you just talk a little bit about the importance of being cognizant of their emotions and managing in a way that's empathetic towards them?
Sure, Andy. I guess, you know, for the first time in modern history, you know, we as a human race are really united on how we're feeling. Across the globe, we have shared condition and shared emotion. So it's easier to understand for the first time. And I think it's important for us to understand and empathize the range of emotions that we are going through. You know, from what I've observed so far, that businesses as organizations also have emotions, right? You would find it hard to believe. But as you said, emotion in a business is the collective emotion of people running the business. And what I see is that there are 4 stages of an emotional journey that we as individuals or we as businesses are going through. The first stage, when we all got hit by this, was the stage of continuity. How do we keep things going? We were stocking up on supplies. Businesses were making sure that they could run the operations, they could keep serving customers remotely, keeping their employees safe. So it was all about that. The second stage is preservation, right? Conserve resources, plan for really long, uncertain times. And I see a lot of businesses doing that. The third stage, when you start getting to grips, is planning, right? How do I plan for the new normal? It's going to continue being like this. How do I keep sustaining? How do we keep working on things as individuals and so as businesses? And the fourth stage, which is actually when you start coming to terms with all of this, is what I call innovation, right? So we as individuals have started figuring out new ways of keeping kids engaged, families happy, working productively. And organizations are also now starting to see, is there an opportunity? Is there a way of, operating profitably, continue having jobs, create new services, create new offers? So I think as a marketer or as a business, it is important to listen and understand where on this journey your customer is or your customers are, because everybody is at different stages. It's totally unfair to assume that we've all reached the stage 4, right? There are a lot of people who are still figuring out how to continue doing things. So we as a business, I think, find it's very important to see where they are. That makes you more empathetic, that makes your engagement productive, and that enables you to offer the right kind of help and create the right value. So I think perfectly valid to understand emotions, and I find it easier to bucket it and see where on the journey they are. But I agree, as businesses, we're not immune to emotions now. It's a very emotional time even for the businesses.
Yeah, and it's interesting, those four different phases that you talked about. Do you sort of rate where any particular client is on at that stage? Do you do that consciously, or is it just something that you have in your mind and you just intuitively try to work out, okay, they're at this stage, or we can interact with them in this way?
Right. So I don't think there's a framework that we've started to crystallize as an organization policy. It's just, when you listen, all this is, reaction to an unknown. So we do bucket in mind people at different stages, and hence our response or our advice or our solution in those 4 stages, right? And that's being done more intuitively or based on some signals, or sometimes when we talk to them, when we send out a communication or when we speak to the customer, we realize where they are, right? So, but yeah, we do have in our mind our response based on each of these 4 stages.
And where they are.
Listening comes first, right? Listening comes
first. Got it. So, in those different examples, emphasize the point, how important emotional connection one way or another is. And now I want to take the conversation on a little bit now into, let's think about sales and marketing communications specifically. And, how do we, in the context of coronavirus, think about how the emotional connections that we make as we interact in a sales environment or in a marketing environment, how do we adapt to the new world that we're going into? Now I want to turn first here to Simon. So Simon, we've not heard from you yet. Now this is a very interesting question from somebody from a sales environment, because probably for salespeople, the post-coronavirus world is going to be very different. Not so many face-to-face meetings, an awful lot more Zoom meetings. Well, it's quite hard to build emotional connections in a virtual world. How are you and your colleagues starting to address that sort of essential task of maintaining those emotional connections in a much more virtual world?
Yeah, I think it's any challenge that any sales organization is going to be facing over the next few months. I think the initial period where we entered into lockdown, salespeople kind of adapted and they've got used to selling to people as best they can over the tools that they have. Eventually, you're going to run out of contacts that that are going to give you that latitude, because you've already built up a relationship of trust with them. So how do you then build with new contacts? Because, you know, organizations will cycle as they furlough staff and change them out. How do salespeople then immediately network and create those bonds when, you know, we're certainly, I live on the outskirts of London. Everybody is not going to be piling into the center of London for some time soon on the commuter trains. So salespeople need to learn a new set of skills. You need to learn how to present over a video conference, you know, how to gain that trust. They're also going to have to learn to be better listeners, because there's a lot of unspoken communication in a sales meeting. You know, you read the room, you see who's interacting, you see who talks with who, or particularly if you're selling in Asia Pac, it's very hierarchical. So you look around the table and see who the kingpin in the room is, who they're all reacting off. You know, it's a different way. And if you can't do that on a video call, it gets to be quite tricky. So I think there's going to need to be a step from buyers and from sellers. From buyers, I think they're going to need to be a bit more forthcoming, because we're not going to have that offsite coffee or drink or the, you know, quick meeting recap on the way to the lift. They're going to have to obviously forgive or grant permission for, I think, salespeople to record video calls, to watch back, to listen back, to make sure they've got, you know, the overt and covert communication that's going on. So that there's a step that buyers need to make as well, and understand that we're going to be buying in different ways. Salespeople are going to need to adapt and prepare better. I go crazy at salespeople who wing it. You know, I like people who prepare meetings, prepare questions. They understand what they're trying to do, where they're trying to get to. They're respectful of other people's time, you know, and they plan and prepare it. Now, the interesting thing is, and I'm sure we've all encountered this in the last few weeks, it's amazing how quickly an hour-long or half-hour-long call goes with a colleague. And a bit like back in the days when you used to have a phone box and the pips would go, and you try and say everything just at the last minute just to get it all done. You know, we've got to be more efficient and respectful of time. And I'm trying to land a lot of meetings early to give people back some time. Because I know I get tired after 4 or 5 back-to-backs. So there's a lot of kind of emotional intelligence is going to have to come into selling as well. So there's a few initial thoughts. So go on.
Really powerful. One of the things that we're finding, because in our business we're now using Zoom communications all the time for meetings that previously were face-to-face, and what we're finding is when we're talking to people that we know quite well, established clients, it's okay, not too difficult. You know them, there's relationships there. Where it's harder is where you're trying to establish a new relationship, you know, and it cuts out all that soft, you know, which football team do you support and all that stuff that starts to build. Any thoughts and advice on how you can sort of, you know, in a virtual world substitute that sort of soft relationship building that's essential to early stages of relationships?
Again, I would come back to planning really well. You know, if you've got time, you research who you're talking to. You know, you can still find a lot of information from people online and their LinkedIn and what they've posted and get a sense of things. Look at the background, ask a few questions. You know, why the hell have I got a stormtrooper behind me? Because it makes people remember calls with me. You know, it's quite straightforward. I think they need to prepare. I would suggest to a lot of salespeople, always pre-draft your follow-up to the client and have it ready to go. Send it 10 minutes within the first 10 minutes after the call's finished, and start to build that relationship. You know, put in a phone call the day after. You know, strangely, I actually think the phone is going to come back stronger. Now, we will all get tired of just staring at screens all day, and we'll get back to selling a little bit like the 90s, where you first had mobile phones and you could efficiently make a few calls in different ways. But sales has always adapted. Remember, you know, we've gone through faxes, mobile phones, Blackberries, email. Fortunately, email has been a cushion for a lot of bad salespeople, because they'll just go, "Oh, I've emailed him, he didn't get back to me." Nobody really responds to email unless they're looking out for your email. You know, so there's a few little changes that people are going to need to make to pick up and open up that emotional connection that then starts to build a relationship.
Okay, good stuff. And so big thing there, which I really take out of that, is you make a big point about preparation has to be almost more thorough than it used to be, you know, because you can't wing it when you're not face to face with somebody in the way that perhaps people are able to. So that's a really big learning, very, very useful. Another area that I want to turn to in the sort of sales and marketing area is how the way that brands interact, the tonality, the look and feel, that may have to change in a coronavirus or a post-coronavirus world where emotions are scrambled and all over the place and people are feeling differently about themselves. Do we as marketeers have to be ready to change, to put aside the things, the way that we've communicated in the past, and to change tonality to fit in with that? Now, Maya, you've recently had some experience of this, haven't you? And with your role as a global responsibilities on the brand, can you talk a little about this and about the importance of being prepared to be flexible on style, tonality, etc.?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's everybody, all brands are sort of rethinking how they either reposition at a time of crisis, or see it as an opportunity to reposition the brand, or strengthen their relationship, or be seen as an empathetic brand, or a brand that actually did something to make people's lives better during this time. And it's really funny actually, because on YouTube I saw the coronavirus ad, which is literally a montage of ads from everyone from Uber to Virgin Media to Google to Apple to Tesco, and it's the same ad. It's people doing silly things at home, right? So everyone's thought of doing the same ad, which is heartwarming and kind of human, and the insight is the same because everybody's life is the same, and so there's no distinction. So you've got to be quite careful as well that you don't just make a generic coronavirus campaign, right? Because that's not going to position you. So for Western Union, I mean, it was crazy. We were about to push go on this campaign, which had people flying out of planes, right? So it was completely going to be inappropriate, but and it was going to be shot in Spain. So we work with a global agency called BBH, and it was just like, do we do this? Do we not? Because it was at the point where it hadn't quite gotten that bad. It was just in sort of Italy first, and then Spain sort of started, and then the insurance said, we're not going to cover that. And so we had to scrap it, and thank God we did, because we wouldn't have been able to use it. So we didn't push play on the campaign, and then kind of what Amit was talking about, it kind of started hitting you what's happening now. What do we need to do now? And so I think we did one probably really slightly embarrassing campaign in the beginning around COVID, which I don't think kind of struck the right tone. Yeah. But then when we quite quickly realized that it's not just a campaign, it's not one campaign about COVID. It's how do you communicate as a brand during this time? We had to go back, because in my role globally, I set sort of the guidelines. What does the brand need to sound like? So I don't actually make the individual regional ads, but I sort of provide the overarching direction. And we had to relook at our tone of voice. Is it we've tried to become a more playful brand recently, but is playful the right tone? Yes, for some brands, and I know Sam will talk to that a little bit. But what about for when people are sort of worried about, to my earlier point, getting their money, and what they're looking for from a brand like ours is sort of reassurance, helpfulness, availability, and sort of really thinking customer first. So yeah, we had to sort of come together as the rally team and think about what are some tactics, what are some campaigns, what are some promotions we need to do, and then what are some bigger things we need to solve for, which I think we'll touch on a little bit later. But also how to communicate in the right tone, which strikes the right balance between sort of being helpful, is appropriate for the category, but also has warmth in it. So. Yeah. So it's quite an interesting experience for me as a brand strategist to be able to sort of think on my feet like that.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a couple of things I'd take out of that. One is this, you need to be ready to adapt and change and reflect and adopt a tonality that's right for the times that we're in, and that will be different for different brands. But probably lesson number one is be prepared to be flexible. The second thing I took, which we've heard from some clients, is watch out for that sort of formulaic COVID ad, that sort of COVID communication. Sure. Doing some work with one of the London ad agencies. It wasn't BBH, but it was another one. And they were showing me all of the ads that clients wanted to do, all of which were trying to pay lip service to COVID in the same way. And they were trying to talk to clients and say, this isn't differentiating, it isn't meaningful. You don't do this. Just try to understand where the relevance is for you. So that's another lesson for us. Don't just fall into the easy trap of going, oh, I'll pay lip service to coronavirus and I'll get benefit for it. We may not. So really good examples. So we've got from Simon, we need to prep, prep and make sure, particularly in the sales environment, that preparation's good. From there, stay flexible in your communications and don't fall into the trap of formulate COVID ads. And the other point I wanted to go to was with Sam, where there is an opportunity for brands in this period, because there are positive emotions associated with coronavirus as well as negative ones, and if you can find a way to leverage some of those positive emotions in an authentic way for your brand, there are rewards to be had. And Sam, you were talking about how your brand's all about celebrating human endeavor, and you found some particularly relevant examples of that, and you've done some work with it. So can you talk a little bit about that example?
For sure, and also I'd like to pick up on a couple of the points from Simon and Naya as well. So in terms of, record breaking is all about the celebration of human endeavour, but it's for the good times. But to Naya's point, how do you adjust brand strategy to your times that you're hitting the right tone? And I think for us, moving from celebration to recognition, we were really proud to be able to work with and to recognise Colonel Tom Moore, for example, and his 2 extraordinary records, working with his team to be able to celebrate that, big advert in Piccadilly Circus on that. But it's about being, relevant at the right time and having the right message. And again, you see that all of the adverts saying nothing, and then you also see brands flipping, for example, the perfume companies that are now making hand sanitizer. And if you're not in those businesses, it's about how can you find that relevance. So for us, I think that recognition and quiet celebration, but also on the front of our website, we actually said record breaking's gone indoors for now, which I'll come on to a little bit later. But on the B2B side, brands wanting to find a way to engage with everyone stuck at home looking through their video camera, can we do employee engagement, online and through home, and make our employees emotionally feel a little bit more reassured, your word, Maya.
Oh, you've frozen.
About sales teams. Your point, Simon, how do your sales teams operate in the new normal? So I think that engaging employees at home, that reassurance, and also a bit of entertainment and emotional fun that we've been providing. The other side, only because I went to the Edelman Trust Barometer meeting this morning, they were talking about the importance of trust, which has been an ongoing theme from them for 20 years. And the trust in our politicians has apparently increased by 11%. I'm not going there right now. But in terms of the brands that you trust and what can they do, I think that's what we've really been looking at. In terms of a record-breaking title can be a shorthand for trust and reassurance in a world that seems very unstable right now.
Yeah, very good, very good. And that sort of, records are about celebrating human endeavour. And that is a very relevant emotion for right now, isn't it? Because, we're celebrating the NHS and all the endeavour that humans, nurses and doctors put into that. And we celebrate Captain Tom because of his. So if you can find those emotions which are relevant and authentic, and certainly for Guinness World Records, that's an entirely authentic connection. There are big bonuses to be had. So really interesting, different aspects of the sort of, challenges for sales and marketing professionals in getting this emotional connection right during this period. But that sort of begs the next question, which I want to come on to, which is, all right, if we all agree emotion is so important and we've got to get it right, and we all acknowledge it's changing during the pandemic, so how do we assess that then? How do we measure it? Because measuring emotions is not easy. So let's just have a little bit of discussion about how that's done. Maya, you were talking when we were discussing before about some of the things that Western Union do to try to understand the soft side of consumer connections. You talk about some of the things you do there, please.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of consumer brands, just stay very connected with our consumers, just to kind of, aside from just brand tracking, but also just getting a lot of qualitative feedback and verbatim, feedback that we can use to just make our experiences better and also inform our campaigns. And so one of the things that we do with both our B2B clients, so Western Union also has a payments and B2B side. So, we work with all kinds of organizations, but we have a panel of consumers and SMEs, and I think there's some sort of medium-sized businesses on there as well. And it's just a community. It's a panel of category users mostly, and lots of loyal customers as well. And we've sort of do a pulse survey with them, specifically for coronavirus times, actually, to just kind of get a sense of what's happening, what are their challenges, and that information has helped us shape lots of things, including what to prioritize during coronavirus in terms of services and products and tactics, but also it's just really heartwarming, really real stuff as well from consumers, and it's amazing how much people are willing and want to share. And we actually even did a campaign out of it. So some of those stories were shared on Instagram as with our consumers' permissions, of course. So videos of consumers talking about some of the challenges that they faced, either being away from their families or sort of just recalibrating at this time, and how that's affected them. So yeah, that's one of the things we've done to kind of keep in touch.
You're doing a lot of regular sort of touch points with consumers, groups of consumers, just trying to keep close all the time and get a sort of intuitive sense of what's happening and how our emotions shifting, and then where appropriate, even using some of those insights in comms programs or whatever it might be. So it's almost frequency of touching consumers is important. So Simon, the challenge is different, isn't it, in a selling environment, but the emotions are equally important. How do you assess the way that customers are feeling, or how you should react to them from an emotional sense? What do you do in a sales world?
Well, we were in, being a massive global organization, we were in a fortunate position in that we'd already done a lot of work with our Asia Pac clients before, obviously, Europe and then the Americas got of infection. So we'd had a lot of experience. I mean, in fact, we even had offices in Wuhan around, the way that Asia Pac had dealt with it. They were already forewarned because obviously having had SARS and things like that. So we managed to take a lot of those learnings straight away. As soon as it began to break across Europe, first thing we did with the account teams was just reach out to your clients, let them know we've done this before, we've got experience, we've got, stocks of things on hand. We offer everything from, trading properties to, managing them for owners. So cleaners, security guards, canteens, all that kind of thing. So as you can imagine, they were coming to us for face masks, sanitizers, all the things that you hear about on the news. So at a immediate desire and need level, we were very much connected. Take that 4 or 5 weeks on, we were due to have a customer advisory board where we fly some of the top people together and spend a couple of days learning to get to know each other. So our typical clients are Fortune 500, top, some of the biggest brands in the world that we tend to work with. So we moved this, so our C-level did the call exactly like this with some of the biggest thinkers. And it was incredible. They took it straight away from, yes, business, downturn, but very quickly people moved to the emotional and caring attitude of, I'm worried about my staff, the mental health of staff who are working remotely. I'm worried about how we make a safe environment for them to come back into work and build confidence again in the workplace. When was the last time you shook someone's hand? You wouldn't think about it. You go to a normal networking event. If SmartX was in person as it was originally supposed to be in Ascot, we'd have probably shaken 100 hands a day. Who knows? So people have to kind of deal with that and work it through. So this afternoon I received, I live southwest of London, just on the London-Surrey border, and there was a survey came out from South Western Trains looking about how they're going to scale services for people coming back into it. And actually they'd really thought about that survey because they were talking about lots of things like, if we do this, how will you feel? And how often do you think you're going to travel? And suddenly you realize they're looking at a world where people aren't going to buy a season ticket anymore. They're going to want to go into 3 days a week.
Yeah.
If they possibly can.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting kind of outreach from there. And then just to turn it the other way, we've seen that BBC News sting where the newsreaders are sort of explaining how they're feeling about, not being reporting on the news, but being in the news, part of the story. We'll see our colleagues again. So it's interesting how it's affected people going into that. From our point of view, we're pleased. We've really connected very well with our customers through this. And the big discussion now is, when do you think you'll be returning to work? How do you want to return to work? And we've launched a whole bunch of things to help people through that. And if you think you normally have 300-400 people on an office floor, and now you need to replan it to have 100. So do you have 100 people coming in 1 day a week each, and so on and so on and so on. So there's all these challenges that we're dealing with clients, which is very here and now.
Yeah, but again, I'm struck by you're clearly very thoughtful about creating the space, creating the time to have those softer discussions with people and to give people the chance to, talk about how they're feeling, how their organizations are feeling. And I guess that provides opportunities for emotional connection and to understand what those emotions might be. This is a really difficult area because most of us in the world of sales and marketing are very good at measuring hard things like where people go shopping and how many times a week they buy XYZ, but we're not very good at measuring soft stuff, the emotional stuff. And one of the things that we find as we work with businesses is that there's not an awful lot of use made of what they call implicit research tools, which can connect with subconscious emotional motivators and are incredibly effective at measuring these things. And one of the things that we're preaching to all of our clients is you must start using these tools because otherwise you're guessing a little bit. And these implicit tools are now quite widely available. We use them, others do, but not enough businesses are. And I think as we move through this coronavirus period, an emotional connection is so important. We would certainly urge all businesses to start to make use of these tools so you can measure in a quantitative way how emotions are shifting. I just want to sort of using that, move the conversation on a bit to one of the trends that we've picked up in the research that we've done is that through this period there are two overriding emotions that are disproportionately driving the way that consumers and clients react to businesses. And those two emotions are keep me safe. I'm scared, I'm worried, I don't know what's going to happen. I want to deal with businesses that I feel are going to be very good at keeping me safe. And Simon, actually, that although we hadn't talked about it before, that example you gave of Southwestern Trains and the thought they'd obviously put into that questionnaire, to say, right, if you're going to come back traveling with us, help us to really understand how we can make this safe for you. That is a great example of a business doing everything it can to say, we're going to do everything to keep you safe. So that's the first big emotion that all businesses must be aware of. The second is when humans have been through something like the coronavirus, there's a desire to not go back to business as usual, but rather to have a bit of fun and excitement and do something a little bit joyful. And so businesses that become good at bringing joy in this period will succeed. I've got a couple of examples of these that I'll talk in a moment, but first of all, I want to turn back to the panel and get some examples. And so I'm going to come back to Sam, first of all. And Sam, you were telling us some fantastic examples of what your business is doing to bring joy to your customer base, even during this coronavirus period. So you want to talk a little bit about some of those great initiatives that you're running?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, in terms of business as usual, we've got 70 odd adjudicators all around the world turning up in person, or they were. So we've had to really rethink that, and we've created over 200 different online record challenges, record categories. That might be online pledges or video relays or virtual hangouts or live streaming. So it's been pretty exciting on the B2B side. But hats off to our editorial team, who are probably not listening today, but they're just finishing the book. they launched a daily podcast called Record of the Day on the very first day of lockdown in the UK. And so 7 or 8 minutes of loads of fun. You know, what's the great content that you can do? So trying to do something for all us parents that are trying to homeschool as well as work. But my favourite initiative that we've launched is the Guinness World Records at Home initiative. So this is where you can try record breaking at home. So there's a weekly challenge. Record yourself, upload it, and then our adjudicators are judging those attempts. And it's a really fun way to do something different from the curriculum, but also, you know, to engage with what's in and around the house. The last thing that we've been doing is, how do you add that joy, you know, to for a client? How do you do something? And on that, this actual panel is not record breaking, but
yeah.
So we've been having lots of fun in the office with our virtual versions of adjudications and just bringing, you know, a little bit of joy, creating some headlines, creating new ways of talking to customers for other people. So, yeah.
Those are great examples. I mean, it's just, you know, it's such a great fit with what you do, but it's much to your credit that you've thought about how do we do this during this period. I'll just put out a couple of examples of businesses that we've seen and worked with recently. Similar things. One is a big department store in Hong Kong, Lane Crawford. You know, very posh department store, and you know they have launched an app which is it gives you access to an online interview with a stylist. So you can, even if you're locked down, you can have a Zoom or a Skype with a stylist who will look at your particular style and give you advice. What a great idea! So they're saying maybe you can't come into our stores, but we can still give you joy, you know, at home if you're interested in fashion. And the other one that particularly caught my eye was Revolution Bars, who are all closed in the UK at the moment, pubs and bars, but they're running online cocktail making workshops and virtual parties. So again, it's ways to bring joy to people, you know, even in the middle of coronavirus, and those brands will get big positive kicks from this if they for doing that well. Simon, you had a couple of examples of things that you'd seen as well.
Yeah, I'll only be quick because I think Amit's also got a terrific one, I seem to remember. But, you know, you look at what the supermarkets have done around, you know, some cooking along kind of videos and things like that. There's been some terrific things. You talk about Revolution Bars. There's a small gin company that will do a live gin tasting with you. So you can contact them and they'll mail the kit out to 5 of your friends. You'll jump on a call with a taste mixer and off you go. So there's some really powerful things that people have done to sort of go above and beyond. You know, I've got some friends trying to invite me to a beer tasting thing where we all buy the same beer and go on from there.
They don't have to try too hard, do they, to invite you to that?
Wow, you know, yeah, it's hard. So there's some really lovely things going on from certain brands, and those brands I think will come out of this very well. Other brands who have maybe made some missteps along the way, perhaps around, you know, furloughing, non-flowing staff, things like that, I think people will remember that. And that might reflect as they come on from there. So it's a delicate balance to get right, exactly like Mayo was saying about the tone of her campaign earlier. You know, whilst there is an opportunity in a crisis for people to try things differently, there's also an opportunity for people to really, you know, make some big mistakes.
Definitely, yeah. Well, good examples. And then Amit, yes, you do also had a couple of examples which we'll just ask you to take us through.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess, you know, brands need to be genuine and do whatever they can. I think from a business perspective, we are in the business of making sure that people, offices, machines and applications stay connected wherever they are in the world. And we run close to a quarter of the internet every day. So I guess the business is doing what is really critical these days. From a communication perspective and from a fun perspective, I guess, you know, B2B brands are generally not known to be, you know, having a lot of fun, but there are small things that we and other brands are doing. The first is to, you know, acknowledge the fact that the recipient of our messaging is not alone. They are surrounded by family. And, you know, how can our communication also add joy? So I see a lot of brands doing gamification, including augmented reality and virtual reality in their communication so that a lot more people can have fun with that. Also, like us, many other brands have sports sponsorships. which we used to engage customers at sports events, and now there are no events. So the brand ambassadors that we have rights with, the sports stars, and I guess that could be a leverage, and we're figuring out ways in which we can bring them to engage with our customers, their families, talk about how they continue to build fitness, mental resilience, for instance. It's a big thing in sports.
Yeah.
So I think there are resources at everybody's disposal, and it's about making a genuine effort to see how we can share and contribute to making people safe and having fun and stay happy.
Yeah, there are definitely ways to do it, and okay, that's some great examples. Now we're just going to come to the final thoughts in a moment, and I'm going to ask the panel if you could give your colleagues out there just one piece of advice for navigating through this period. What would it be? But just briefly to summarise before we come to that, I should say as well, we'll try to do a couple of any questions that are posted. We'll try to take them at the end of this. So if you haven't yet had a chance, just post questions, and we'll try to quickly get to them. But the ground we've covered really is, first of all, the importance of emotions generally in connecting and building relationships with customers, and the way that those emotions are changed fundamentally and often quite permanently through upheavals like coronavirus. We've talked about how that relates to sales and marketing communications, and some of the key lessons that that you need to bear in mind as you think about communicating through this period. We've also looked at some of the different ways of measuring emotions. It's difficult, and I do urge anybody who hasn't done it to get your head around implicit technology. It's very, very powerful. And then, really thinking about these two overriding emotional motivators that we see time and again, which is keep me safe, bring me joy. If you can do those things, then our experience is your brand will be in a good position. So let me turn to my four gurus and ask for one key thought each of the sort of piece of advice you'd give to the group here about coming through this period. Sam, let's put you on the spot. First of all, what have you got for us?
Okay, one thing, which is always a challenge for me, don't underestimate the power of shared experience. And the reason I say that is shared experience is the heart of everything at the moment. If I think of how many jokes and memes and the amount of messages I'm getting on my WhatsApp, using humour to try and get through this. But the best example I want to give you, and I'm glad we mentioned the pub and going for the gin tasting, because last Friday there was a record attempt for the most visitors to a virtual pub that was organised by Crowdfunder and was organised in less than a week. And they had 6,321 people buying a virtual pint, and all the money going to the National Emergencies Trust. And I just thought that ticked all the boxes. Virtual pint, there were lots of comedians involved that gave their time and raised in one evening £32,000 for the NHS effectively. So in terms of that shared experience, it's about coming together and being creative and being relevant with a great message.
I think that's great. That the power of shared experience is huge, especially when it's hard for us to share in that way. Okay, that's great. Maya, what have you got for us?
Agility and flexibility. I think it's a great time to be those things. And an example I can give, we're a big organization and subject to all the regulatory things that most financial companies are. And one of the things that we as a company were able to do by bringing rally teams together, but also by working with the regulatory and relevant government bodies, all of whom realized that these are exceptional times, we were able to just really fast track from something like 6 months to literally 2 weeks, being able to launch what we call eKYC, which is a way to get your verification and security thing done all online rather than having to visit a branch to do it. And it's because there was a pressing need to do it now that way, but also because regulatory bodies realize as well that they have to be a bit more relaxed on things, which they're very strict before. And so people working together, just willing to be more flexible and just making it happen.
So stay agile, stay flexible, don't be stuck in the old ways. Doubly important these times. That's a great piece. Amit, can you add to those two?
Right. I think mine would be to move from the customer paradigm to a community paradigm. we've been preaching, we've been dishing out solutions, but this is a time to really realize and communicate that we're all going through the same thing.
Right.
Share, our vulnerabilities, share lessons that we've learned, share victories we've had in managing the current situation. And I think those are immensely valuable first-hand experiences. And I think they will help us create lasting bonds. As Simon said, people would remember. And we do need to ensure that we are remembered in the right way.
That's great. So almost shift from a custom paradigm to a community paradigm, and be prepared to show your vulnerabilities during this time. People will appreciate it. And Simon, what would you leave our audience with?
Well, certainly it applies for our business, but I think it applies for all businesses as well. We're looking for ways to get closer to our clients, to help them understand the challenges that they're facing and where we can help. For us, it's all about building confidence within our customers that they can return to work. Things will get back to normal. Yes, we're going to have to go through a period of change as we re-enter the workplace and reimagine what the workplace is going to look like. But, everybody can partner along the way, share the lessons and victories that we've had, and we will all get through it. It's going to take some time. We're going to be a long, long way away from any vaccine. So we need to adapt to this, sort of distance reality that we find ourselves in. So we're all in the same place. We've just got to collaborate together, listen hard to people's needs, and try and build confidence that we can move forward.
Really good. I mean, seriously, that's 4 great points. So power of shared experience is crucial. Stay agile, stay flexible, move to a community sort of focus, and be prepared to be vulnerable, and collaborate. We're all in this together. Let's work together. Those are 4 fantastic thoughts, I think, to end with. And I'm just going to touch on, we had a couple of questions that have come through. I'm just going to briefly touch them. But before I do that, let me say a big thank you to the 4 panel members. That's a fantastic conversation. Thank you very much for your time and all the preparation, all the inputs. And I'm sure everybody here really appreciates it. And my questions are, Maya, there's a question for you. You haven't finished yet. And the first question is, given your earlier comments, are you expecting to revisit the tone of voice to reflect the changes of mood that we're seeing? What are your plans in that area?
Yeah, I don't think we ever go back to exactly what we were before. So I think it would be naive to say that there isn't a new normal, as everyone's calling it, right? So for sure, yeah. I mean, I think we've grown as a brand during this time, and we're always updating our brand guidelines to stay current. So it's not a static document that doesn't get updated for like 5 years. And so yes, in due course we will review. Especially if you think about it, the best time to do that is before you do another major production, right? Before you go and spend $1 million on a big campaign or whatever, you see it from the lens of what is right for the brand to do at this point. So yes, ever changing with ever changing times, for sure.
Yeah, back to your point on agility, you need to be prepared to be flexible and agile. Great, that's a good answer. And the final question is around saying, what should organizations, as customers are under continuous emotional stress, trying to keep the business afloat and all the uncertainty around them, what should marketing organizations not do? What should they abstain from doing so as to avoid dissonance with customers? So I'll ask Sam or Amit to give us an answer on that one. What should marketing organizations not do?
Amit, do you want to go ahead?
Please go ahead first.
Okay, what should they not do? Well, I wouldn't be starting to introduce lots of new practices for a start. I think it's much more about what we've been talking about. It's about providing that reassurance and staying relevant and being trustworthy within that marketing context. I think starting to overtly sell to the point that we've seen lots of mistakes that other people have made is not the way forward. It's about being relevant and being there for the customer as and when they need you. And I know that sounds fairly simplistic, but it's back to it's back to marketing basics, which is matching the right product and consumer with the right need, and staying sensitive in that approach. And as Amit did say earlier, sharing your successes and failures, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, good.
Just to add to that, the last few points on what we should do, the exact opposite of that is something that we've all experienced, either, partially others doing or our organizations probably charting out by mistake. So don't be opportunistic, don't spread fear, don't contribute to fear. There is no leverage for anybody in this. We are all in the same boat. We can't leverage it. We can only get benefit by helping others. So even inadvertently, the communication appearing to do exactly that is disastrous on the long term.
Yeah, great.
May I add something, Andy?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I guess the flip side of, I kind of caught myself thinking when I was answering the previous question, the flip side of being agile and always current is obviously building brand value and the long-term view, right? So to Amit's point, actually, one thing I think brands shouldn't do is shift too much from their core purpose or their credibility, and it's really important from an authenticity point of view that you're not because that then does make you look opportunistic, and you probably are being opportunistic, and so you always have to balance that agility and currentness with the what is my brand purpose, and what is the long-term view of my brand, and what is something that I'll always be for customers and society.
Stay authentic. Yeah, it's a really good point.